Hello, and welcome to another edition of Meeting with the Manager. I'm City Manager Erik Tungate. I am proud to host a special guest on today's show. The Honorable Scott Benson from Detroit City Council will be joining me as my guest. I will also be welcoming in our very own Kim Marrone, our Director of Community and Economic Development, among many other things. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce my first guest, Councilmember Scott Benson. Well, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you being here.
Hey, no problem. Thank you for the invitation.
So tell me about yourself. What do you do in your current role, and what do you like about your current role?
Well, Eric, as you know, 3rd District City Councilman, so the City Councilman in the City of Detroit for the Northeast Side, one of our outlying districts, so we don't have any of downtown or midtown, but we do have a very strong residential and industrial base. So my background is military, 24 years United States Coast Guard, urban planner by trade, economic development, real estate developer. So I've had a number of hats that led up to this culmination as a legislator for the City of Detroit.
What do you find most challenging about your current role?
You know what, it's ironic that we're here today in your communications hub. So for me, one of the biggest challenges that I have as a councilman is communicating with the public. What do we actually do? What have we done to improve the quality of life? So I'm really excited about being on the show today to talk about some of the things that we're doing in the City of Detroit and how Oak Park and Detroit can find common ground and help lift the region.
So describe your views on the region. What can cities like Oak Park and Detroit do to work more cooperatively together?
Well, ironically, as you know, as the large city goes, so goes the region. But when you're chasing after someone that you want to come locate in Oak Park, we're chasing after somebody too. But it doesn't do any good when the narrative is Detroit, oh. You want to have it where, we know I live in the Detroit metro area. Oh, good. You guys have a strong regional transit system. You have great education system. You have great housing stock. And so that makes it easier for you to chase after somebody as well as Detroit to try to attract somebody. So as goes the region, as goes all the suburbs and the inner core cities as well. And so we need to work together cooperatively to ensure that the regional profile is a positive one.
There's no better example of what you just said than mass transit. So how does that fit into your motif?
Oh boy, and you know what? And you'll probably notice a bike on the lapel. I am a big public transit and non-motorized transit guy. So it means that I take public transit for the long portion of my trip, but I also use a bicycle to get from for the last mile and to the last mile. And so for me, it's how you're going to attract our millennials. And as you know, we need to have a young generation coming into our cities and filling up our homes. As the older generation may downsize, empty nesters, you also want to have young families locating into your city, and you have to have public transit. So right now, our young families are demanding public transit. If you have employees that are going to the suburbs, they need to have public transit. If you have employees that are going into the core city, they'd like to have public transit to not have to pay for parking when it comes to a Tigers game or when it comes to a Pistons game and a Red Wings game. How nice would it be to be able to run right down Woodward on mass transit versus having to drive your car, pay $30 at the game? It just really makes the region an attractive place to be, as well as for me in Detroit, as the City of Detroit.
Probably like me, you were disappointed that the transit millage failed. And so what are your thoughts about getting something passed the next time?
So we had an East Side Transit team, and it's actually on Facebook as well. And so I partnered with a Democrat out of Grosse Pointe Woods and a Republican out of Harper Woods, and we had a bipartisan team where we were really advocating for regional mass transit. We've been working with Ms. Tiffany Gunder to find different ways to get Macomb County to hop on board. And so right now we're doing our homework, we're talking to elected officials to try to make it a go next time. And 2018 is going to be key. So now that you have the Q line on board, and they have to have some type of revenue stream in the future, we have to have regional mass transit and bus rapid transit going up and down Gratiot, out the Woodward corridor, out to the airport, out Grand River. We need to have that for the City of Detroit and for the suburbs. And without it, we're just not competitive. So in 2018, when it can come back up again, I believe that it will, we need to ensure that we do our homework. We tell Macomb County what the benefits are for them. And if you ride out Gratiot in the morning, you're going to see tons of people on the bus. And if you hit Gratiot in 8 Mile, you're going to see them get off a smart bus. Then you're going to see them get onto a DDOT or vice versa.
Right.
And that's not the answer.
Right.
We need to have the ability to have a seamless system and bus rapid transit and a regional transit system. And so Ms. Tiffany Gunter, looking to help her to get over the hump in 2018, let Macomb County know what they need to know, and keep the votes that we already had in 2016 to make sure it's a go next time.
I think that's absolutely right. And I would just add my 2 cents, and I'm close with Steve Duchesne in East Point, and one of the, ironically, of course, one of the concerns that they all had in Macomb was that it wasn't enough, that buses weren't going to get the job done, not that they didn't want anything at all, which is very surprising, and I would concur. I think we've got a long way to go, but we've got the right personnel. I think we're moving things down the road, and Detroit's rebirth is truly helping the suburban customers understand that. Why does a strong city of Detroit matter to the suburbs? Now, you talked about this a little bit, but from my perspective, it's always explaining this the opposite way, which is, why should we care? If we're doing well, why should we care? And I often explain it in terms of a symbiotic relationship, like you talked about a moment ago.
So to me, it's, if you're doing well now, you can do even better. So why stop there? And I'm not from Detroit, I'm from Los Angeles, California. So you often talk to people and you know the narrative, hey, where are you going? I'm going to Detroit. Oh.
Yeah.
Or I'm from Detroit. Oh. So the way that the narrative is now changing, so Detroit now being a top 10 destination, so Detroit now attracting larger top tier businesses to locate in the city also helps everybody. So the old saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so if you're going out of state trying to attract somebody, if Lansing is going out, or if, say, East Point is going out, or Detroit to try to attract a large tenant to come into the city, it helps to say that our region, we have enough employees, we have a workforce that has the skill set and the education that anyone needs. We're actually partnering right now with I won't say the name, but a outlying suburb to be able to provide a portion of the workforce for a large tenant that's coming into the city, because they just don't have the workforce they need. They're like looking at Detroit, can you support us here? We're going to land this new tenant, but we need your support. And so that's the type of symbiotic relationship that you talk about. So a strong Detroit helps the region, and with the region's help, then everybody else eats. So we can all eat very well, as long as everybody's doing well. And so Detroit needs to be that. We don't need a mismanagement. We don't need a negative narrative. We need to have a positive narrative and a positive, strong core city.
So more specifically now to Oak Park, and I have 30,000 residents here in a border suburb. So what do you think we can do to work more cooperatively in terms of economic development and business attraction? You've mentioned a couple examples of this, but I always find it most interesting that we don't really have a regional economic development agency. We sort of have a hodgepodge of it, and you look at comparative regions like Chicago, who has World Business Chicago and some other entities. How do you see that shaking out?
So it's how can we support each other? So the conversation earlier about the outlying suburb that's actually working now with the city of Detroit to try to provide labor for one of its new tenants that's moving in. And so we need skilled labor, we need entry-level labor, we need a workforce that we can work with, something of that nature. So if Oak Park saying, you know what, we've got this big fish on the hook. Detroit, we have a gap in what we can do to get them on board. Can you help us? Say, sure. Detroit, do you think you can provide 20% of our workforce for this new tenant? Yeah, let's work together on that. So something of that nature. Detroit, we have a number of our residents who are looking to work in this facility downtown that you guys are opening. Can you help us with some type of transportation? Sure, let's see what we can do together. The more that we do, the better the region does, and it grows the pie. And so instead of just having, let's say, a number of 10 in our pie, if we can grow that pie to 15 or 20, everybody does better. So it's just really about how do we improve the region, which in turn improves our individual municipalities.
So what do you think of, we talk about mass transit as an economic development tool, and what are your thoughts as a tool to attract?
Oh, now, Eric, I've been a mass transit, public transit guy for a long, long time. As an urban planner by trade, regional mass transit, public transit, is really a way to help to attract more people and to attract more residents and improve our quality of life. And so when you talk about, in my district on the northeast side of Detroit, we've recently opened Link Logistics. So 200 jobs are at that location. But in the city of Detroit, many of our residents are challenged when it comes to having reliable transportation. So a public transit system helps to get them there. So we have a bus line that stops right at the plant, We talked about closing it down, but now that we have the advent of the plant, we see ridership is up 30%, and we need to keep that line open because you're able to get your workers to that location, which means you're now able to attract additional tenants, and we're hopefully going to be able to build out our industrial park based on the fact that we have a reliable transportation system for our residents. If it comes to weekend jaunts, so say you live at 12 Mile in Gratiot, or say you live at Woodward in 12 Mile, and you want to get downtown, maybe you're going to go drinking, maybe you're going to go to the game. You don't want to park your car, you take the regional transit system, so it makes it a viable option. And so now, instead of, well, we'll just go to a local restaurant, maybe, you know what, maybe we'll go downtown, or maybe someone downtown says, you know what, I'll go out to West Bloomfield, or I'll go to Birmingham, or I'll go hang out in Oak Park today, because I know they got really good Vietnamese restaurants in Oak Park. So that becomes another option. It's not just about the car. And as you know, our newest, youngest tenants in our city, I call them tenants, but our newest, youngest residents are millennials, not big fans of owning vehicles. Yeah. So public transit is a big attraction. And we lose so many residents in the city of Detroit, and I'm sure Oak Park as well, yeah, to Chicago, to a DC, to a New York City. Why? You don't have to buy a car. So that, for me, is just, it's intuitive and it's just a no-brainer. You need to have a regional transit system to compete. And for us to compete as a region, not just Detroit, not just Oak Park, as a region, we've got to have a regional transit system. Without it, we're just not competitive, and we're going to continue to see people moving out to other areas that have it and got it generations ago, yeah, the need for public transit.
Well, you wouldn't see a region or city of this size anywhere else with this predicament that we're in.
Welcome to Metro Detroit.
Yeah, it's really unique. So having said all that, where do you think our region is going to be in 20 years? We have made a tremendous amount of progress in just a few years, especially in the core downtown area, and other parts of the region, as a matter of fact. So where do you see the region in 20 years?
So with the advent of water becoming a larger and greater conversation, we have the Great Lakes here. So we have the largest collection of fresh water in the world. That's going to be huge. And I think 20 years from now, you'll see why that's going to be really, really important. You also have, there's a lot of upside here. We don't have a regional transit system yet. So imagine what that's going to look like, and the ability to attract more residents back into the Midwest. And so over the last several decades, you've seen a outflow of residents. You're going to start seeing us become more attractive, and an inflow. So regional transit, I believe, is going to happen. I believe we're going to make it over the hump next year in 2018 when it's on the ballot. I believe it's going to make us a far more competitive region, and I just see us on the upswing. And so in 20 years, I see that our population is stabilized, we're growing, there's more wealth, we're able to actually sustain larger homes and the kind of wealth that you need to grow an area. And so when you talk about Los Angeles or DC or New York or Houston or Dallas, you just see the value of property, the wages, and the quality of life just increases as there's more money and investment in the area. And I just see us going that direction as a region.
So I think we've taken some great steps in terms of guarding against, as much as I think you can, for gentrification. But you know, will we be able to sustain, and I don't mean as much as residential as just the growth and the rehabilitation that's going on. We only have so many buildings, so.
Yeah, so I see where you're going with that one. And so for me, it's really important that we got to grow our population. And I'm a firm believer that one of the reasons that property and land is so affordable, in all actuality, is probably undervalued, just based on where it needs to be and what it actually costs to build, develop, and then find the rents to support it, that we're going to need to have more demand, which means you need to have more people. And so we have got to grow our population, which means quality of life, which means schools, which means safety, which means the amenities that people want to have, the museums, a developed waterfront. We have an international border that is way underutilized. So we just really need to develop. So the downtown, there's a lot more to go, a lot more to go. I mean, we have an underdeveloped waterfront. We have 141 square miles in the city of Detroit that really need to be developed. We have some school issues, we have some public safety issues, but we're trying to turn those things around and move in the other direction. And for me, what's going on downtown is starting to spread out to the neighborhoods, because once you get to a level where people just can't randomly, without strategically thinking, you know what, I'm going to pay the rents in downtown. And then once your millennials start to have families and fall in love, they're going to want to have homes. And so before Oak Park takes all of my millennials, I want to keep some of them, that we have to have a public safety in the schools. And so what's happening in downtown, I believe it's a positive to me. It's going to spin off, it's going to push more people out eventually. So you're going to have the homes. You can't all have a 4-person family and live in an apartment or a condo. You want to have a yard in a large house. And what we can't support in the city of Detroit, others will be able to support as well. And so that's part of the rising tide.
Right. All right, so I have to ask, I mean, I know, and I ask this question partly because I get this question every other day from a resident and typically one of our seniors about some of the concerns coming out of Washington. We've had a friend in Washington in the urban cities for quite a while, and a lot of that has been diminished to some degree, let's be honest. So what is your take? What do you think happens with our relationship with Washington?
And so I've been very critical, and I've been very, very engaged in what's going on out of D.C. Because you're absolutely right. Under our previous administration, we had a very good friend in D.C., and especially for the city of Detroit, when we hadn't had a friend out of D.C. in generations. And so to see the direction that the current administration is going, it's very concerning. And so recently, Detroit City Council, we passed, and this is just on the HUD budget that we saw coming down, because our CDBG dollars are so important to helping support our most vulnerable population, our seniors and our poor residents, that they're looking at a 13% cut in that budget. And so we passed a resolution asking Dr. Carson and asking President Trump to not cut that budget. So that's just one thing we've done. We've been very vocal on the fact that we do not support a decrease in our sanctuary cities, or we're not going to act as the immigration police for the federal government. We've had a Know Your Rights workshop with the FBI, with immigration, with Wayne County Sheriff, with Detroit Police Department, indicating what we are and what we are not going to do and how we're going to support our immigrant communities. And so just things of that nature. And so we're fighting back on that. And so I was very, obviously, as an elected official, and I'm a Democrat, and so I was very supportive of Hillary's campaign. It's unfortunate she didn't make it, but we also have to look and balance that we have to work with this current administration. And so where we can, we're trying to work with them and reach out and say, hey, if you're talking about infrastructure investment, the way we talked earlier about bus rapid transit, about infrastructure of that nature, we need your support. We want to work with you.
What's more concerning to me, and this was going to be one of the things I was going to ask you, is our relationship with the state government. And it's no secret that cutbacks in terms of revenue sharing and Act 51 monies and so forth have been at the distaste of cities, because they've obviously hit the bottom line. But and nowhere is that more prominent than in the city of Detroit. This has been going on for more than just this governor. So where do you see this ultimately going in terms of financing for cities?
So that's a very good question. And so that's the question that we've been asking the legislatures and the governor's mansion for years, how you have to properly support your core cities. And reduction after reduction, when Lansing has a surplus, there's an issue there. And personally, we felt the pain. We were forced into a bankruptcy recently, which meant you had to cut back, you had to finance that bankruptcy on the back of your retirees due to basically on the loss of their medical. So when does it end? And I understand you've got to have a mission and the city has to be healthy, but it also means that the state has to be willing to share those tax revenues as per the state constitution, and they're just not living up to that end of the bargain, and it's hurting our cities. So I'm sure that the cutbacks have also made a little belt tightening here in Oak Park as well. We had to tighten our belt in the city of Detroit, and every year it seems that you're tighter and tighter. Eventually, you don't have any more belt loops. And so, but there's got to be an end to it, which also means that we need to find people who are supportive of the needs of the urban cores.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, for us, we have, since I've been here at least, we have chosen a growth strategy because we're a built-out community. We don't have places to go. So it's either we build out sites within the city and build up, or we don't do anything at all. So we have to do that. Now, we also have to be efficient and find these efficiencies wherever we can. Healthcare is just one area of this. But you guys have been affected to the tune of about $800 million since 2002 in revenue sharing cuts alone. We've been affected almost $20 million. It's all relative. I mean, it's all if you
scale
look,
it.
Just scale it, right?
Scale it.
And it's you're absolutely right. It's devastating. As somebody who runs the budget, I can tell you it's devastating. And if you look at where our shortfalls would have been over the course of those years, it probably would have almost directly matched up. Now, to set this question up, I'll let you know that we were told that we would be getting about a $400,000 a year increase in our Act 51 monies.
Okay.
We've not seen that increase. So we were told current year we would receive that. Now, we're just a few months now from the end of the year. We haven't received a dime. So where do you see this going? We had a transportation bill that
Yeah.
made its way through.
That was less than optimal.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you see the pressure from the locals? And the city of Detroit drives a lot of this stuff, is why I'm presenting this to you. Do you see the pressure from the locals becoming so much so that eventually this gives way and we get a real bill with real funding?
So this is where you're going to see the ability for an Oak Park to see it much faster than you are in the city of Detroit. And so just based on the other priorities that we have when it comes to social, when it comes to other economic development, blight, public safety, that's not a big pressure. Although I hear about sidewalks all the time and about streets. But just what I hear first, that's not the highest priority for us. But when I talk to my Department of Public Works director, I hear from him all the time, I need more money here, we've got to go to the state for more money there, we're not seeing it. So I get it, but for us, it's just, that's not where the loudest voice is coming from right now. But when you drive down the street and you see the potholes and you see an on-ramp that's not been maintained because those are either state dollars or they're city dollars, it's just, you see the pressures. But for me, it's just not the loudest just yet.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree, and I think it might be a little bit different for us. I mean, we have a sidewalk program; it's a little different priority here, but for us, you know, obviously every penny counts, and to not see that increase is just another slap in the face, really, to what we're trying to do here.
And especially when there was such a major vote and such a major initiative to get a new formula to help fund how we rebuild our roads, and we still haven't hit it yet.
Yeah, it's this real laissez-faire attitude towards the urban centers of our state, and unfortunately, you know, we've gone as far away from, you know, socialism as we possibly could in terms of, you know, right to work and cut business taxes, and we're getting rid of the personal property tax, and now they're talking about the income tax. So I'm expecting this flood of businesses at any moment. So
yeah, I'm sure they are behind the floodgates, which are being held closed by
the Sulaks. They're probably just stuck.
But we also have to start talking about what type of government do we want to have? What type of city services? What type of state services, federal services do we want to have if we don't want to pay taxes? You can have all the different multipliers and formulas that you want, but in the end, you have to have revenue to support expenses. And if you have no revenue, and if you want to live within your means, that means you have to cut your expenses, which means your city services. Are we going to pay for roads? Are we going to have street sweeping? This year, we're bringing street sweeping back to the city of Detroit for the first time in, I want to say, 20 years. And so that just kind of shows the direction that we're going, that we're actually seeing an increase in revenues, and so we can increase city services. But if you continue to cut revenue, then you got to cut city services, state services. And so for me, I'd rather see more of the basic than just keep cutting and cutting and then have some crazy formula in the background that's allegedly going to be able to support those services. It's not going to work.
It's not going to work, absolutely. And it's just this view that things will take care of themselves. And really, I think the true test for our local units of government, at least in my view, is that we're able to tie our spending directly to quality of life and whatever those assets are going to be, whether it be a sidewalk program or roads or whatever. One of the things we've done here in Oak Park is when we present those things, we tie it, we do that, we tie it directly.
Good.
And I think people, there's more buy-in. I unfortunately believe that there's been enough of this emphasis on, you know, call it fake news, whatever you want to call it, where people believe that their tax dollars just go into a black hole and they're never to be seen again. And the reality is they're not. The reality is that they're actually being used, for the most part, for good purposes, quality of life purposes that we all count on every single day. That messaging has been mismanaged on the other side of this, unfortunately. And I hope that it's able to come back around.
Now, this goes back to your first question. What do you find to be the most challenging? And that's the communication, which is why I'm really glad to be here today to be able to work with you to just talk about what goes on behind the scenes and to help get the message out. So this is fantastic. And actually, I hope you don't mind. I think we're going to set up a set just like this and put a third district on the wall,
You
so I
should,
can
yeah.
talk about more of the things like this. This is fantastic, and so communication is key. And you're absolutely right. When it comes to fake news, you're letting others set the narrative. And unfortunately, I think people have been kind of lulled to sleep. You know what? That's obviously fake. That's not true. You know what? You have to continue to fight to get your message out there.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to overcome the fake news, the negative narrative when you know it's not true, and just get the truth out. If you're doing the right thing, if you're properly managing the community's money, then you just let them know, and your work will show the rest, and the fake news will wash away.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, we have to keep fighting. And so,
Yeah.
Eric, like you, I'm in the fight as well, and I really appreciate you bringing me on the show today. And I like this back and forth, and so when you're ready to have me back, please invite me again, I'll come back.
Anytime. I really appreciate your input, and you know, to your point, I couldn't agree with you more. So we've got a mayoral election in the city of Detroit.
Okay.
Your prediction?
And I've said this publicly, I support all the incumbents.
Okay.
And I hope my colleagues will support me. But I am publicly supporting and privately all of the incumbents. I like what's going on. I like the narrative that's going on in the city of Detroit now and throughout the region. I like the cooperation that we have with the mayor's office and city council. And I work very well. My district has seen the benefits of a council relationship with a mayor that works. And obviously we have a different form of government from Oak Park to City of Detroit, but having a relationship where you can go talk to the mayor, where the mayor can come talk to you, and we've been able to locate 2 brand new factories in my district. Well, one is coming online, about 400 jobs. The other one just recently came online, and we have 200 jobs, and 80% of the workers there live in the city of Detroit. So we're benefiting and we're feeding our families in the 3rd district based on that relationship. So I am supporting all the incumbents.
Fantastic. I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you being
Eric,
here.
this has been a blast, man. I really
Appreciate
enjoyed
it.
this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our very own Director of Community and Economic Development, Kim Marrone. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Eric.
How are you?
Great.
Well, I want to start off with a couple of questions. I know we just went through this very extensive public planning process, and as a result of that process, and we did it in-house, we have a brand new master plan. You spearheaded this effort, so can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm very excited that we finally got through the process of updating our master plan, which had not been done since 1996. We had a great team of 5 people in-house, all professional in their specific areas, that we were able to do this at no cost to the city. So very proud of the product that came of it and all of the public input we had from both of our residents and our business owners as well as the city staff here.
Well, as you know, when I hear that there was no cost to the city and we have this amazing product as a result of it, then I'm very happy. We didn't sacrifice anything as a result of using city staff. Do you
No,
think?
absolutely not. In fact, I think we got a better product going that route because we had all of the people who work in-house and know this city inside and out. We talked to our residents and our businesses who have lived here, worked here, owned businesses here for many years to see what they're looking for in the future for Oak Park. And we have everybody on staff here that are great and professional in the areas that they work in. So I think we got a better product as a result of it.
Well, certainly a more customized product and
Absolutely.
more hands-on. It was
Absolutely.
wonderful. So one of the outcrops of this extensive effort, and people don't realize this is a very long, year-long plus effort to do this, one of the outcrops of this was pocket parks. So we just hosted a pocket park training, if you will, over off of 9 Mile. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the things that we are trying to do moving forward in the future is to do some more placemaking type activities here in Oak Park and make it a more walkable community and where we look at other types of transportation besides just vehicles. And adding placemaking is very important in attracting families into our community because those are the elements that they're looking for when they're searching for a home. And we selected a street off of 9 Mile, Sherman Street, because mostly the businesses that are in the area and the sidewalk aesthetics in that area and the proximity to Ferndale that has the walkable community. So there are a lot of different aspects we looked at when we selected Sherman Street. And we've had approximately 26 people at our planning sessions, and they're all residents of Oak Park, and they are having fun and getting excited about this project, where we're going to close the street in June and turn it into a city park.
That's great. So where are we at? I know we've got a standing facade improvement program and some other aesthetic improvement programs. Where are we at with some of those planters and those kinds of things? Do we intend on doing those things in the long term and then seasonally maybe for planters and other things?
Yeah, so the planters and the sunflowers, we plan to continue that. Not just continue it, though, we plan to beef it up as we're able to gain funds in our Corridor Improvement Authority that can help fund those types of projects and activities. We hope to make it even more attractive. These are just our first steps, and we're going to amp it up as we get the funds available.
And just as you just mentioned, the Corridor Improvement Authority, I know you have some news there you want to share.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We have our Corridor Improvement Authority in place. It's been approved, and we are slowly starting to build our fund balance there that we can actually take on some great projects and do those placemaking and economic development activities dedicated to the corridor.
Right. All right, so I have to ask, because everybody wonders all the time, and I get asked all the time, of course, as you know, big projects, and one of those is WWJ, that restaurant transformation. Where are we with that project, and then other big projects?
Yeah, we have a lot coming scheduled for our Planning Commission meeting in May. WWJ is supposed to be one of those. We have a few liquor license applications for restaurant establishments that will be moving forward in the next month or two. And we have some exciting projects we're working on that we just can't quite talk about yet, but I believe the community will be very excited.
Would you say those are transformational type projects?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so you've been here at the city now going on 3
It'll be
years?
3 years in June.
Doesn't seem possible.
I know.
And do you see Oak Park, one of the things I know when you first came here, that Oak Park is a nice, affordable alternative to some of the more expensive communities around us. So do you see us benefiting from that?
We are benefiting right now that Oak Park is an affordable community because businesses are seeing the changes that we're making here and that we're becoming a more exciting place where people want to live in. And that's their workforce.
Yeah.
So it makes it exciting for them to want to come in, and the cost right now is affordable. It's changing.
And a great city government, right?
Yeah, a great city government, of course. But yeah, the pricing is starting to change, especially in the housing market.
Yeah.
The values are steadily
Yeah,
increasing
they're creeping up.
at a dramatic rate.
Thank you for joining me today. We are a city government moving solidly and stably in the right direction, making changes and finding improvements wherever they are necessary. We know you are counting on us to deliver, and we take that very seriously. Until next time, thank you for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again.